to talk about music and literature, really. Specifically, the soundtracks we hear when we read something. And I think the best place to start off this conversation is with Haruki Murakami. In his novels, he is pretty obvious about musical illusions. In one of his books, a character is he becomes obsessed with Beethoven and classical music, and then that becomes a driving a driving force in the story. Um, but in a lot of his novels, the soundtrack is jazz, different types of jazz. Sometimes the setting is a jazz bar, and this makes sense because before Murakami was a full time author and committed his life to literature, he was a jazz bar owner, a jazz club owner. So it's clearly a part of him. And then also, quite a few of his books are named after Beatles songs. Some of the characters in his books are more rock oriented. I remember one of them is like a trombone player in a rock band. So he's really obvious about planting music in the heads of his readers. But what about authors that are not so obvious? So I came across a video, Blank on YouTube. It's an animated video using voice snippets of Kurt Vonnegut, kind of telling a little bit of his story. And they used kind of some abstract jazz, just piano keys, like weird keys and chords that are kind of eerie. And I was like, okay, this fits so well. Because if you read any Vonnegut, you know that he's kind of all over the place in like the best way possible. That's what's so charming. Like in Breakfast of Champions, he constructs a story that is he constructs a story that's basically every character has the same amount of weight to the story until the story collapses on itself. So it makes total sense that they would use a little bit of abstract keys and like kind of experimental stuff in the background. Also, my friend keeps sending me these posts about Dostoevsky over. They're like Instagram reels, and they're over paintings of like Eastern European men in fancy Victorian furniture. And they'll just have a quick text blurb about the author, and then they'll have like a eerie kind of evil or epic classical music in the background. Now, I've never read Dostoevsky. I'd like to read Crime and Punishment. It seems really interesting. But my friend hasn't either. So it's interesting that he just randomly sends me and spams me with these weird posts. But after talking to him, I kind of realized he's attracted to the overall aesthetic of it all, even though he's never even, looked at the literature of it. So that kind of got me thinking about music being an element in creative works. And it can kind of apply to any type of creative work. It's just the only thing that varies is how big of a role, like how big of a percentage music is playing in that work. So like, obviously, music being a creative work, music would be 100% music. But when you look at musicians, it's kind of different. Like the biggest example, and probably the biggest example in popular culture is Kanye. Kanye taking on different eras. I mean, you can look back at Kanye's career and notice all the different albums adjacent to his look at the time. Uh, from My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy to 808s and Heartbreaks, like it's they're completely different vibes. And he clearly is purposely world building these visuals around the music that he makes. Um, I mean, most famous, Virgil Abloh being his creative director and also the most, probably the most influential person in streetwear in recent times. So it only makes sense that he would collaborate to build this world. And obviously, in this case, the music is the main course. It's the meat and potatoes. It's most of what Kanye wants you to consume, right? It's about the music. But in other creative works, it's kind of a secondary element, like in literature. So those who are more obvious, like Haruki, and those who are less obvious, like Vonnegut, they're both using music as a tool, really. But, you know, I say all of this. I say all of this to kind of get to the point of if just look at what you're reading. Obviously, read it, enjoy it, but take a second and kind of go through this exercise next time and try to imagine some sort of soundtrack. And if that's hard, then maybe music is not really a large focus of that work, right? Only makes sense. But if it's clear, that might be purposeful.